Questioned documents. A questioned document is a document whose origin may be false, may be a forgery. These crimes are generally not violent crimes when a person falsifies documents, but they're certainly a common enough crime, and we can apply forensic techniques to trying to, solve cases involving questioned documents. So questioned documents are where something, either the entire document or something about it is illegitimate, false, forged. Often this applies to just signatures, or sometimes it can happen that they add something to signatures. Like, person's name was Jan, and they changed it to Jane, and I guess, let's say, had a check go to somebody called Jane instead. These things happen. They can add something to the terms of a document, such as, like, an agreement to pay more money, even though it was never signed to. But these can be, if it's added to a document and it's false, well, we should know about these things. They erase terms or even signatures. In this case, let's say the real name was Jane, the person wanted to change to Jen. So yeah, there can be erasures, additions, obliterations, all different kinds of things that can happen to documents that are illegitimate, and we want to be able to catch them. It's not only for legal documents, but also for, like, suicide notes. If it's a suicide, very often we expect a suicide note. But if it's not a suicide, there's no note. Could be there was actually a homicide, but the killer wrote a fake suicide note. We'd like to know if that suicide note has been forged or not. There's one thing that we have to often know that's the basis of a lot of question document analysis, and that's where the fact that everybody's handwriting is unique to that person. The handwriting starts when you learn, maybe in school, at home, how to write. A person picks up their own little habits of how to write each letter in order to get into the right shape, and each person has their own way of doing it. And therefore, handwriting is an individual characteristic. No two people's handwriting is exactly the same. This is not just the shapes of the letters, also distances between the letters, the letter heights, or even the heights of different parts of the letter, like the left side of a W as opposed to the right side of the W. Some people it's exactly even. Some of the left side is higher, right side is higher. A lot of different things. Also, spelling and grammar can be unique to a person. Punctuation styles. Different people have different ways of thinking. They will therefore spell things, use certain kinds of grammar, certain punctuation, and writing styles. The fact is that you can't just use one characteristic to show that this handwriting can be related to this one person. You can't just use one characteristic, like the way they write one letter. You also can't show using one letter that might have been a forgery, that the true person writes their W's in this way, and this was written in a different way, therefore it must have been a forgery. One characteristic is not enough. You need several of them. The minimum number of characteristics has not been established. We usually try to trust the expertise of the document examiner, who can explain that there's more than just one, how many of them, and how many are needed to show that it must have been written by somebody else. They have to show enough differences in the letter writing, in the grammar, and whatever it is, to actually show that the document was forged or the document was true. Either way, it's not. You can't just do one characteristic. You need several of them. How many of them? There's no specific number, but an expert document examiner can figure that out. And if he's used as an expert witness, don't just trust him because of what he says. It's got to make sense. If he says these two characteristics are enough, be very careful with just believing him. He's got to have a good reason to say that. One is not enough. Two of them, probably also not. 3, 4. When you get to 8 or 9, then you can pretty much believe him. But they have to be able to convince people that the number of characteristics that they found is enough to prove a forgery or a true source. To compare handwriting, the question document, of the document where there was writing and we don't know if it's true or not, we have to find an exemplar. The true, let's say, whatever it might be. Let's say we suspect it was forged by a certain person. What we have to do is get writing from that certain person, that suspect, and see if that compares to, let's say, the signature on the document. If we have enough exemplars, enough writings that are known to come from the suspect, then we can say okay, and we can compare it to the signature there. There are two ways of getting these exemplars from a suspect. By the way, that was the case of a suspect. It could also be someone who a true signer of the document. We want to know if he really signed this document. Well, we can get writing specimens, get exemplars of this person from elsewhere, and compare that to the signature, and we'll know whether he is or is not the person who signed on the document. So there are two kinds. There's the collected writing specimen and the requested writing specimen. These are all exemplars where we know where the source is. They can be either collected, that is, when without being told, without being asked about it, we found other writings of this person, wherever it might be. We might have found, his diary. We might have found him signing receipts, in a store. Whatever it might be. These are writings of the suspect or the person we're interested in, that when they did not even know that he was writing them, and the writings would be compared to his signature. So these are the better ones because he certainly wasn't trying to forge a signature then. This was his signature, or this was his writing. He wasn't trying to disguise his writing then. But then the other kind is not as good. It's called a requested writing specimen. An exemplar of a requested writing is when we call him into the police station and we say, okay, we'd like you to write, this paragraph. And then he knows that this writing is going to be used to be compared to something else. So he might deliberately disguise his writing. So we'll deal with that kind of a problem, but those are the two ways of getting exemplars. Either collected, where he didn't know that the writing was going to be analyzed, and requested, where he's pretty much pretty much in the know that his writing is going to be analyzed, regarding some kind of a crime. So the main problem with writing identification is the lack of exemplars or the lack of the original writing. For example, there was a suicide note. If there's like a whole page of the person's disappointments in life, then we have a lot of writing, and we can compare it to a lot of, let's say, collected writing specimens. I mean, if it's a suicide, where you can't request anything from him, but we have enough collected writing specimens, and we have the original writing, let's say the suicide note was a page, then pretty much we can, an analyst, a forensic handwriting analyst, would not have a problem identifying whether it was of that person or was not of that person. That's if we have plenty of writing, the original writing, and the exemplars. But what if the suicide note just had two words like "life stinks" or "I die now"? I mean, 2 or 3 words. There's not many letters in that, so you might get a lot of exemplars from him. Let's say you even have his diary, so you know exactly what his handwriting should look like. But there are only two letters here. If they're slightly different with 2 letters, let's say 6, 7 letters or 10 letters. If there are only 10 letters. Maybe these 10 letters are written a little bit differently than his diary writings. So we have to have enough original writing characteristics, let's say of the suicide note, or even the signature on a document, and enough of